Before we can really dive into Seven Mountains, we need to understand how it's organized and what their specific focus areas are. They've organized their efforts around what Lance Wallnau, Andrew Womack, and others refer to as the seven spheres of societal influence. So let's get the most obvious ones out of the way. Now, the government sphere is where the activity has been most visible. Everyone probably saw Paula White hanging around Trump beginning back in 2016, but you probably didn't know that she's a leader in the New Apostolic Reformation, which is this quasi-organized group of 7M leadership. Lauren Boebert and Doug Lamborn here in Colorado, they're considered 7M influencers. And just a quick search for something called Project Blitz will reveal many more lawmakers around the country that have been involved for a long time. And we'll be touching on the government mountain in a lot of detail. Education is another one of the spheres where activity has been obvious. The organized takeover of public school boards by Christian nationalist extremists, the push for voucher programs, and the presence of student clubs like Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, which they partner with the Alliance for Defending Freedom, which there'll be more to come on that in the future. Those are just some examples. Okay, now the more obscure spheres where you might not have noticed the influence. So first we have family, and given that James Dobson was one of the first 7M influencers and organizers, it shouldn't be any surprise that he would name his organization Focus on the Family. Now, Focus on the Family's Daily Citizen website is still one of the origins of many of the Republican talking points that you eventually hear on the news and other places. And the LGBTQ community and women's rights, they are a direct threat to the idea of their nuclear family, so that should also be obvious where that sphere comes into play. Now, religion is also one of the spheres, and hopefully it's obvious that they think that Christianity should be the primary religious influence around the world. And then we have the media sphere. Did you know that there's a full-featured YouTube equivalent called Subsplash that's designed specifically for churches and religious organizations? It's usually rebranded with the organization, so it's not that obvious, but I've been shocked at how many religious organizations and leaders use Subsplash under the hood. Now, that must really help with sharing some of the more hateful messages. And also look at the growth of AM radio stations and the consolidation of traditional newspapers, and you'll find some interesting connections. Now, some parts of the entertainment sphere might be obvious, but some really aren't all that obvious. Now, I'm sure that everyone's heard of the Kevin Sorbo and Dean Cain film God's Not Dead, which that was produced by Pinnacle Peak Pictures. And maybe you've heard of the football movie Facing the Giants, or maybe the Kirk Cameron feature Fireproof. Those were produced by a church-based company called Sherwood Pictures, and they made millions of dollars on shoestring budgets. And then some of them might not be so obvious. Like there's a 7M influencer right here on TikTok and on Instagram. It's the viral dancer Miranda Derrick, and her videos are produced by the hiding in plain sight organization 7M Films. And then last we have the business sphere, and this one might be the most obscure, but I am learning more about an organization called the International Christian Chamber of Commerce, which is specifically referenced by some of the originators of 7M ideology. So that sums up the foundational aspects of the 7M story that me and Princess are still going to continue to tell. And I'm telling you, it's going to be a ride.